Welcome back to the Messy City Podcast. Kevin Klinkenberg here. Happy to be with you. And I hope everybody had a good New Year's celebration. I did as well. Had a lot of fun here in Kansas City. We actually got to do a fun thing at the one of the local breweries, Casey Beer Company, BIER, which specializes in German beers, thus the spelling. They actually do a German New Year's Eve at what becomes 5 o'clock Central Time, and it's a really great event and party that a few hundred people go to, and you get to actually celebrate the New Year's early, and then if you miss out on the ball dropping on Dick Clark's New Year's Rockin' Eve, it's not a big deal, but that's a little something that we did here. Also got out to see a fun comedy show, and New Year's Eve is always one of those nights that I always kind of enjoy. I've always enjoyed it as a holiday. I know a lot of people don't like it very much. A lot of people prefer to just kind of stay home and celebrate in their own way, and that's fine. But I've always been one that kind of enjoyed it, and I like the whole ritual of bringing in the new year. And that's really what brings me to this this episode here today that I wanted to talk a little bit about. It's that time of year where you basically get to think a lot about what happened over the previous year and maybe make some resolutions or goals or set some ideas in motion for the next year. And I always take some time to do a lot of thinking about what I might like to do in the next year and things I might want to change. I frequently make a list that's kind of ridiculous in its length and scope of different aspects of my own life that I want to work on or improve. And that's just something I kind of do for myself, but I also generally like to take a little time and think about what I'm working on professionally and what might need to change in that world, and try to give some deeper thoughts or meaning to the work that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis and the team that I'm working with, and try to help give us some focus for the next year, which is really a challenge in the line of work that I do and that a lot of people do in place management. You're pulled in a lot of different directions every day, every week, and so it's really important to try to dial it back to what is mission critical and figure out what things you need to say no to. What I wanted to talk about here today was I gave a lot of thought this year to what if I were to boil it down to a fairly short list of what was really important for the part of town, of the city that I live in, to be successful. Like, what are the things that would really are absolutely critical to get done well for this area to thrive? What would those be? And I think we all in our own areas or cities or towns or wherever we live, we probably have a different list of what those are, but I wanted to give some focus to that because it has relevance, obviously, to the work that I do every day. I will say, right off the front, I have had a very unusual career path in a lot of ways. And it's probably something I would never recommend to a young person if I lined it out on a paper and said, here's what I did, this year and this set of years, and then I went on and did this other thing. And it's been kind of a crazy schizophrenic path in my own career. And I started obviously as an architect and have worked in architecture and urban planning. I've worked as my own entrepreneur. I've worked in local government, and now in the nonprofit world, I've worked in private sector development. So it's just kind of bounced, to a lot of different places. And I think one thing I would say that this has done on the good side is that it's really given me a lot of insight into very different areas of really everything that impacts our cities and towns. So whether we're talking about how places are designed, everything from buildings to streets to sidewalks, landscaping, etc. I've had a lot of experience and work in that area, but also in the policy arena. I've spent many, many years working on and writing zoning codes and being involved with policy initiatives related to development and planning. And now, with Midtown KC Now, I've gotten to experience the management side of the equation. I often talk about those three legs of the stool: the design, policy, and management, as each being important and critical for a place to succeed and to think about. All three of those have to be thought about well. And so now I'm in this place management area where I get to really impact public space management, day-to-day efforts related especially to our clean and safe programs. And so that really has helped me build kind of a crazy diversity of experience and interactions over time. So many interactions with very different kinds of people that are working in the planning, design, construction, development of our cities, private sector, public sector, nonprofit, you name it. I suppose I like to think it's given me a much more well-rounded perspective than most people would get, and the experience to understand things that I see that actually work and that are important, and things that don't work. And there's a lot of things that we do that don't really work in our efforts to improve our places. And so in the past, I've been really, on a lot of these episodes, I've been fairly critical of a lot of like major top-down efforts that come from federal, state, or local governments, and really encouraging people more to embrace the sort of bottom-up ethos of working on smaller problems, as they say in Silicon Valley, to fail fast, basically learn things, try them out quickly, try them inexpensively, and then figure out what's working and improve. There's a lot of truth to that, but there are also times where you really need that big effort, some sort of big coordinated effort that you might describe as top down. So I'm never one to say that those aren't important ever. We need those to exist and to work in our communities as well. We just have a poor track record of those efforts really improving the lives of people in our cities and working out well for the long term. That's kind of where a lot of my bias has come, is just frankly just lots of years of time in the trenches and work on so many different plans and projects to see what might actually have a positive impact on actual people that live in cities. So what I want to do here today is zoom out a little bit and go through this list that I came to after kind of writing it out and editing it and refining it a little bit to a list of 6 things as I look ahead towards this year and beyond that I think are really important for Midtown Kansas City to succeed. I'd be really interested to see how you think this compares to your place. What might be the same, what might be different. I think there are obviously some things that are similar from place to place, but there are always unique characteristics based on what's going on in your community. Is it growing? Is it not growing? What's the cultural situation like? There are just many, many dynamics involved. So with that, I'll jump right into it. I've got this list of, in my opinion here, the 6 things that Midtown really needs for us to be successful and to thrive well above what we're doing now. We're in a place now where we're improving and a lot of things are getting better, but I would not say we are thriving. We're not really there yet. As I've mentioned before, we're still recovering from decades of just enormous population loss and lots of other issues. So we're not there in terms of thriving, but we are improving. We are on a positive trajectory generally. So those 6 things. I'm going to start right off the top. The first thing that I think our area needs, that frankly every area needs, is public safety. Call it law and order if you want, but it's really it's the reason that we have local governments. It's the reason we come together as a community, which is to provide for the common safety in a sense of law, as opposed to lawlessness, which often happens when you don't have any kind of true law enforcement, policing, or judicial system. It may seem strange to mention this as a number one criteria, because obviously we think that that's just a basic function that's always being taken care of. But I will tell you, I feel like we have really gone astray in our understanding of the importance of this, especially in my community. And I do like to remind people. I don't like to remind. It's just, it's part of the reality. People don't feel safe in their community because of rampant crime, because of just a sense of lawlessness, of disorder. They will leave. That is absolutely the either number 1 or 2 reason that people generally leave a place. And in my city, we have experienced a really awful wave of crime and disorder in the last few years that has not abated. There are some specific reasons for that. I mean, there are reasons all over the country that people talk about, but there are some very specific things that are part of our nature here in Kansas City, Missouri, that I won't really get into today. But I think it's always good to remind everybody that law and order or public safety is number 1. That's what we need our leadership to emphasize. And if we don't have it, then nothing else really is going to work. It doesn't really matter if we don't have any kind of effective law enforcement or judicial system, or a way to punish people who are trying to do bad or evil things. So I have that as number 1. I think it's something that we have a long ways to go to work on in my city, and it's top of the list. Second thing, on a more, on a more positive note, but again, this may seem obvious perhaps on its face, but it's just activity. And when I say activity, what I mean is just the visible presence of human activity everywhere in our part of town. We have seen a lot of really good redevelopment efforts in the last few years. A lot of new things happening that are encouraging, but we still have really large areas of land that basically just sits vacant, or where there's very little activity day or night. And for urban communities in particular, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, it's that street level activity. It's the interesting walk that you can go down where there's other humans around and there's good activity happening. That is the primary amenity of being there. That's why you live in a city, is because of the ability to walk outside your door and see and experience unique, cool things going on that you just won't get anywhere else. So those are businesses, they're events, they're any number of things where there are people just creating life. And we have, again, with many years of abandonment, we've lost a lot of the sort of natural creation of that you might see. But we're starting to get it back a little bit. And what we really need is a lot more of it. So I think when I think of this, I think especially of a lot of things that people would consider like pop-up events that can happen very informally and quickly and inexpensively to populate an area. And so these have become really popular in the last decade or so in cities all over the country. It might be a food truck corral, or it might be a inexpensive beer garden that can be created somewhere. It might be a craft fair or a small business fair of some kind. Those are things that can be done on vacant properties. It might be arts related. Who knows? There are any number of things. The possibilities really are endless on what could happen. But that activity is absolutely crucial to people enjoying a place and wanting to continue to be there, and then walking the streets. And it also enhances the safety of an area when there's actually activity, maybe not 24/7, but certainly 18/7. So I have that up very high in the list because I think it's something we need to do a better job of, and I want to help figure out how we can do more in that world to really just help populate our empty spaces with good activity. So a third thing that helps with the activity that our part of town certainly needs is just frankly more housing. And again, we are a growing community. So whenever you have a growing community, frankly, it sounds really, really stupid to say in a lot of ways and very logical, but you just need more houses. You need more houses, more apartments, more places for people to live. And unfortunately, we have kind of stalled out in that regard the last 2 or 3 years. In our part of town, we have some projects under construction that were approved 2 or 3 years ago, but there hasn't really been anything new due to some policy changes at the local government level, and then also the macro factors that are impacting everybody, the interest rates and construction inflation that really has hammered development the last couple of years. And so we are seeing the new supply of housing stalling out temporarily, but demand is still strong. So the reality is when you have that combination, what you're going to see happen is prices just go up. And we're getting the benefit of an area improving and housing prices going up, which benefits some and hurts others. But we're also just not getting more people in our part of town. And I am a firm believer in the fact that neighborhoods, cities, you're either growing or you're dying. And I would rather be on the side of growing. And that doesn't mean you have to have exponential growth or that you have to want exponential growth. But if you aren't adding people to your area, then they're going to go somewhere else. And eventually, if you discourage people from coming to your area because not enough housing is being built, then eventually your area will experience a slow death. And that's something we're struggling with here. We desperately need more housing in our part of town. And I think I've mentioned this before, but we have about 1/3 of the population that we had in our peak. Our peak year was 1950. Even with stability and some development in the last decade, those numbers have not really moved very much at all. So we're not declining anymore, but we're not really increasing at any noticeable rate. So more housing begets more activity. So those two things really go together. And frankly, more housing, more activity begets more safety. So all of those work very well together. Before I get into the rest of the list, I do want to remind everybody, if you get a chance, please hit the like or follow button on your favorite podcast service, Apple, Spotify, Google, whatever that might be. Also, leave a rating or a review. It definitely helps the ranking of the podcast. I've really enjoyed doing this the last year. I plan to continue doing this indefinitely, and I'd love to get as many ears on it as possible. So anytime you can rank it, review it, whatever, that helps. All right, back to the list. Fourth item. So this one probably not a surprise for those of you who know me really well, but I think beauty is incredibly important for any area to succeed, and it's something that our area needs to do a lot of work on. So what do I mean by beauty? Well, there are a lot of ways of thinking about this, but just frankly, the combination of beautiful buildings and beautiful public spaces that make a place worth lingering in, and that then makes people want to come back time and time again to linger there, just because you enjoy the beauty of it so much. So we don't have, my part of town doesn't have an ocean or mountains or a lake or a big beautiful river. So we don't have those sort of major natural amenities that you would see. We do have a pretty landscape, in my opinion. We have some rolling topography and really nice limestone outcroppings and areas, very attractive parks and everything that were legacies from the City Beautiful movement. There again, the word beauty with the City Beautiful movement. And those are great. But we need that beauty in the urban areas, in the heart of those areas where people actually live their daily lives too, where they walk around, where they ride a bike, where they drive a car, where they take public transportation. Beauty is important to all of us, and it's what keeps us coming back to a place. It's what makes us fall in love, frankly, with a place. Is when it is so attractive that we can't imagine wanting to be somewhere else. I'm always amazed at when people in my world don't think beauty is important. So I understand there are people who think, well, having shelter is more important. Yeah, shelter is important to sustain, to be able to live, right? But if you actually want to sustain life, if you want places to thrive, if you want people to thrive, there needs to be beauty in their world. I like to say in presentations sometimes that human pleasure is not a frill. In fact, it's the entire point of existing. If you can't enjoy what you're doing, who you are, the place you live in, the people you're with, that sense of pleasure is incredibly important. And beauty in the built environment is a key factor in that. And we all know this. Every one of us knows this, because whenever we have the opportunity, if we're lucky enough to take a vacation somewhere, we inevitably go somewhere that is beautiful. So that might be a beautiful outdoor environment in nature. It might be a beautiful city or town in your country or a foreign country. It might be Disney World or Disneyland, which frankly has learned what people find attractive and beautiful and have created theme parks that have that feel to them. So beauty is fundamental to us, and we don't spend nearly enough time thinking about that. And I think one of our flaws as Midwesterners in particular is that we don't put nearly enough emphasis on beauty. We tend to be very utilitarian about our buildings, about our spaces, and I would like for us to care more about beauty in architecture and beauty in public spaces. In fact, we have tremendous historical examples to learn from that can show us the way, and we've just got to figure out how to do that again in our current living environment. So beauty is incredibly important. We're going to continue to work on it wherever we can in small ways or bigger ways. And I think it's going to be, I think it's a secret part of the recipe to make people want to live in our part of town and keep coming and stay there for many, many years. Okay, the fifth thing is sort of the flip side of all that, is you need some sort of rules that prevent the worst kind of development from happening. So I am, again, I mentioned earlier that I've spent a lot of time over the years. I've worked in policy. I've written a lot of zoning codes. I've critiqued a lot of zoning codes. I've talked endlessly with people about zoning, which is something in a million years when I was 18 years old I would have never thought I would ever do. But what I learned is that the practice of zoning is critical toward, you've got to understand it if you want to understand how to design and build anything. And as an architect, I had to learn how to do that. And eventually over time, I developed an expertise in it. But saying all that doesn't mean that I think there is like a perfect zoning code. There is not a perfect zoning code. Zoning will never give you great outcomes. It's not geared for that. Development rules or regulations can't do that. No matter, you could have what you think is the most elegant code ever written, but if you have bad designers, you're going to get bad buildings, no matter what. But what a code can do, potentially, is prevent some of the worst, most flagrant abuses from happening. So in an urban area, the way I would describe that would be suburban style development in the middle of an urban area. So a strip mall, a suburban style shopping center, a large format gas station, something like that. Not that any of those, not that the businesses in there aren't needed. They're all needed. They're all useful, and they all serve a purpose. But the way that they're designed and built either reinforces good activity or harms it. And in many cases, they can serve as a multi-decade negative that really harms a community. And we've got a number of those in our part of town that were built in an era when everybody was trying to suburbanize the city. And I understand what people were thinking at the time, but it was a misguided time. People were concerned with the wrong things. They were focused on things that really destroyed the city instead of understanding what our assets are and trying to enhance those. And so I think as we look ahead, we have a few areas in our part of Midtown where we have some rules in place that I think do help us prevent some of the most obnoxious kinds of development that could happen. Again, those rules are not going to just give you good development, but they can hopefully prevent some of the worst things from happening. And I've talked to you before. If you've listened to this podcast very much, you know that I interview a lot of developers. I'm friends with a lot of developers. I really like most developers that I know. I think most of them are really exceptional people, really interesting people who are true generalists in many ways and need to understand so many different things about building a place, building a building. But like every other world, there are some really crappy people too. And there are developers who will absolutely try to harm your community in the interest of their project. They really don't. They're only focused on the bottom line for their project, and they don't really care about you, your neighborhood, your neighbors, etc. And so I think having some rules in place that prevents the worst of that is a good thing. And I fully understand that when I say the worst of it, what I mean may not be what other people mean. And that's a part of having a community conversation about development and design, so we can come to some mutual sense of understanding of what we can mean by it. I know what I have in my head. You may have something different entirely, but that's a critical element. The last thing, this one gets particularly wonky, but I think it's critical to our part of town in ways that it may not be to others. And so it falls kind of under the larger banner of just better coordination and management on some things related to transportation. So what do I mean by that? I've talked a little bit before here about the importance of parking management. We don't really do parking management in my part of the city. And in Kansas City, Missouri, we have a pretty lousy track record, frankly, of parking management. And that is the idea that you might have shared district parking that is managed efficiently and attractively, so as to minimize the need for ugly surface parking everywhere, but still provide for a reasonable amount of parking in places that people want to go to. So parking management as a coordination effort is really important. The other transportation-related thing is just better intersection design. So I feel like this is one where I could probably write a couple of book chapters about. Again, one of the things that I have had to learn a lot about over the years in order to create the kinds of communities that I was interested in, which were sort of traditional walkable communities. I had to learn a lot about traffic engineering. And I tend to come from the Jane Jacobs camp that I think traffic engineering generally is voodoo. And it's basically destroyed the name. It's destroyed the name of science effectively, because a lot of traffic engineers like to purport the idea that everything they do is scientific, and it's just not. A lot of it is really based more on human psychology as much as anything else. That said, there are some aspects of it which are interesting to learn and understand, so that you can learn which levers to pull to make a better place. And one of the things that's very true when it comes to looking at traffic that I did learn from some good engineers who were trying to create really great places along with me was that the intersections, street intersections in particular, they really control the design of the streets. Because those are the choke points. And if you can do effective intersection design, then you can often successfully reduce the width of streets, traffic calm streets, etc., and not have really any negative effect. So I think about that a lot, because we have a lot of intersections in our part of town that really need just a redesign. And for the most part, they're seen now almost like highway intersections or great big thoroughfares. And we really don't have the level of traffic on our major streets that you would expect, or that frankly you even have in many suburban areas. And yet we still have these big wide streets and big wide intersections that are pretty hostile to anybody wanting to walk around. And that we have the downstream effects that because we have these intersections that don't work very well, we have overly wide streets. So from a transportation standpoint, there's a lot we could do to work on better intersection design. Some of that could be with roundabouts. Some of it might be with traditional squares. Some of it might be just very technical things that look at how signals are timed, how sidewalk crossings are handled, how landscaping is handled at intersections. But just in general, we've got a lot of work to do in that area. So one thing that I would like to see going forward that I do think is really important, that will move the needle in a very big way, is just better intersection design. All right. One item I didn't include in my six that I thought I should just talk about for a second was education or schooling. Um, Before I wrap this up, I thought I should talk a little bit about why I left that off, because I certainly mentioned in a previous podcast that that is among the list of things that I think normal people really care about, extremely care about. My experience has been it's probably either the number one or two reason that people choose a place to live. If you have kids, it's of foremost importance of the kind of education your kids are going to get, as well as the safety considerations you have for your own family. If you don't have kids, you maybe don't think about this stuff very much, but I will tell you from my experience, being someone who has kids and had them late in life, it is an absolute sea change in the way that you see the world and experience the world and your own priorities. So schooling and education is absolutely right on the list. But the reason I didn't include it on my six priorities is sort of twofold. One is that in my position, in our role with our organization, there's really almost nothing we can do to impact the quality of education or the education system. And it's not to say that we as parents or individuals can't make a difference, but as an organization, it's just not something that we enter into other than to try to give people information. And then secondly, I think probably more importantly is that here in Kansas City, I feel like we actually have some really good options, and we're probably ahead of the game compared to a lot of other urban communities. We have a robust system of public charter schools here that have existed for a couple of decades, in addition to the public school district, in addition to the private schools and parochial schools. So we actually have some pretty tremendous options. And there are great resources out there for parents and others to try to figure out which direction you want to go. And whereas I think that used to be a weakness for our city 20 or 30 years ago, I think it's in many ways it's an advantage now. Our kids are in a public charter school that we really, really enjoy. It's one of the best public schools in the state of Missouri now. And I think there are others that are really equally excellent options, in addition to the public school district improving as well. So I have that as something that is dearly important to most people, but I did not include it on my list for those reasons. All right, those are my six items, my six priorities or needs for Midtown Kansas City. What are yours? Do any of those resonate with you? Be curious to hear more about your experience and what you think of this list, especially if you're somebody in Kansas City. I do talk about my city a lot because it's the one that I know the best, but I like to share these in many ways because I think they can help people in lots of other places and help you begin to think about your own community and what you might be able to do there. So, Happy New Year, everybody. Happy 2024. Thank you so much for listening. This is Kevin on the Messy City Podcast. I'll talk to you soon.